Now, we've been journeying through Luke's Gospel, and I want to focus upon two verses, well, actually four, two at one part and two at the end of a long chapter where we've recorded some of Jesus' strongest teachings on the end time. So let me read to you firstly two verses from 27 and 28 of Luke 21. At that time, they'll see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. And then at the end of the same passage, we read, each day Jesus was teaching at the temple, and every evening he went out to spend the night on the hill called the Mount of Olives, and all the people came early in the morning to hear him at the temple. It's only Luke that tells us this fact, that Jesus did two things on a regular basis. Firstly, he taught in the temple each day when in the city. And then he retired to the Mount of Olives each night. And Luke tells us, I think, that information before what we know as the Passion narrative, before we really get into those things that lead to the end, to the cross and to the suffering of Jesus. Now, we can't know for sure, but it would seem to be that these matter-of-fact statements show us something important about him, that he was continuing to do what he'd done all throughout his whole ministry. But the Mount of Olives setting speaks powerfully. Now, I think that the way that Jesus was able to do these two things, he was able to be about his ministry, and yet he had to retire too. That's a little bit like Dan was sharing with us before about you need that balance within ministry as indeed in life. You can't really be all church and it can't be all activity of doing things. There are times in which we need to retire, we need to move back. We even use the word retreat, don't we, in a very powerful way today. Sometimes we need to do that to be able to go back, to be able to give of our best. And the thought that the crowds always came near to hear him is also interesting, isn't it? In verse 38, in the same passage there, we read this truth that each day he was there and all the people came early in the morning. They really wanted to hear what he got to say. They had seen him. They had heard him. They know very well that what Jesus had to say was something meaningful and real and could make a difference to their lives. We learn a great deal by observing Jesus. Not just listening to what he says, not just listening to what other people say he says, but to just watch him and see how he goes about things and see how the crowd respond to the way he was. So he knew what it was to teach. He knew what it was to retreat. He knew what it was to come back, and the coming back brought the crowds near to him so that they could genuinely listen to what it is he had to say. Now, in mission, in ministry, in engagement, in community involvement, in all those ways, those components need to be there at the heart of our ministry and our mission. It's the only way we will be taken seriously by people. In a moment, I'm going to ask Dan a little bit more about the work he's now involved with in drama. But before I do that, let's remind ourselves why the crowds came to hear him.